Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I'm James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me, Fox 40's Sean Cunningham. Mr. Cunningham, how are you?
Doing quite well. Doing quite well indeed, despite this awful weather. But the holidays were very kind, and I hope everyone had a tremendous holiday. And yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about this up and down Kings basketball.
Yeah. All right. And of course, we have Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden, how are you?
I'm doing good. Yesterday was an electric environment in Golden One Center, so I thought it was a fun time. I will say real quick, the other day at practice, or maybe it was shoot around, when we watched Sean come in the building and just have so much to say about the rain, it was different getting to experience how you go through and just cope with all this in person.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Brenden, what did he say? That, like I said, oh, we got to write that one down.
I forget the line. I clearly didn't write it down. There was it was a good lengthy conversation about how the rain is just the most inconvenient thing in the world.
Yeah.
Oh, I could
You
do
may have said
hours
F
on
the
the rain.
rain. There was something you said that was like, oh, that's a funny line. Sean.
I'm full of them.
You did say to Avery, why can't it just rain while I'm asleep?
Yeah, yeah. Like if it just rained. I know it's not a perfect world, but I'd sign up for that. If it's like, hey, you know what, we're just going to rain between the hours of like 10 o'clock at night to 8 in the morning. Perfect.
That's awesome. Okay, we got a ton to talk about. The Sacramento Kings came up with a huge, huge victory Wednesday night over the Denver Nuggets. But this team is showing signs of being all over the board. They've got injury problems. We got a ton to talk about. I think before that, though, I want to start off, first of all, our standard. Like, if you're watching on YouTube and you don't mind, give us a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. If you're new to here, become a subscriber there on the YouTube page, or give us a rating review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Lastly, the Kings Beat. Jump on board with thekingsbeat.com. We will have another off the record with the Kings Beat virtual happy hour in the month of January. We don't have a guest yet set up, but that will be announced relatively soon. I'll try to get on that one a little earlier than last time. Getting Mark Jones pinned down to a specific date and time is very difficult because of his incredibly busy life. Which is why it took so long to get the last one done. But it was a lot of fun. So if you're a premium subscriber to the Kings Beat, you get invites to the happy hours, which are a hoot. Outside of
Did
that,
you say a hoot?
a hoot, yeah, a hoot. They're fun. Yeah,
Brendan, I don't even know what a hoot is. So
I don't know if I've
James.
ever said that word in my life.
it's the
I've heard
noise
it,
an owl
but
makes. I don't know. What are you guys talking about? Let's see.
last night was a hoot.
It was crazy. And lastly, well, I'll save that for our final thoughts. I don't like to end our final thoughts with sad news and sad stuff, but so I won't end it with that. I'll just say it right now. Like for those of us in the world who grew up watching Pele play soccer, today is a very, very sad day for the world of soccer, but also like the sports world in general. Just an ambassador for the game and a tremendous, tremendous player. Really got the game of soccer on the map. So thoughts and prayers to Pele's family with him passing at the age of 82 today from colon cancer. So let's get to this. It's been crazy. I think the highs and the lows of this team, they got the fan base all kinds of manic. We've been dealing with that. I mean, this has been people are going crazy. The two bad losses last week, and I'll continue to call them bad losses. You can't lose to a team who's riding an 8-game losing streak and playing on the second night of the back-to-back when you're at home. You can't lose to a team that's 1-9 over the previous 10 on the second night of a back-to-back and think that those aren't bad losses. I don't care who's on the court for those guys. But this week has been a little different. We have the Sabonis injury. And what do you guys make of the Sabonis injury? Because it's been really like a crazy 5 or 6 days in Sacramento of just like I saw it happen right when it happened, on the court, and was like, oh, that doesn't look good. But we're kind of getting to the other side of it at this point.
Yeah, one of those like really freaky moments where you just put your hand on a guy that maybe gets caught in the jersey, although it really didn't look like it. It literally looked like he just touched the dude's back, and there goes my thumb. Yeah, it just crazy. I didn't think he'd be back ready to play through it this quickly. Part of it was going to be, I think, a lot of second and third and fourth opinions. Part of it was going to be pain management, obviously. And then one thing I didn't really account for, not really having a chance to speak to medical professionals who are smarter than all of us, was swelling. And that was something we learned from Domas last night, which was the reason he didn't go in the first game against the Nuggets was primarily because of the swelling and him having a very similar wrap and probably a similar injury to what Keegan Murray is going through at the moment, although that's speculation. But yeah, I mean that it doesn't take a world-class detective. Who's the guy in the Glass
Payroll?
Onion? No. What's the guy's name from in Knives Out?
Oh man, I don't know what his name is.
Anyway, it was the Daniel Craig character. Someone will have it in the comments. I wish we were live. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't take, Perry Mason to figure it out. Perry Mason was a fine lawyer and detective himself, Brendan, from back in the 50s. So I just figure like they're probably having the similar kind of injury. And yeah, he was a really he was a warrior last night. I mean, the guy looked like he was trying to kind of get familiar again. It's not his shooting hand, so that helps. But it didn't look like he had a hard time using that hand. And we were kind of joking with some people. Even Shannon and the PR team was like, "Oh, maybe he'll come back with like a club, like some of the football players do, and have it completely wrapped." And like Jason Pierre-Paul, who blew off his fingers from the Giants, if people remember that years ago, and I kind of thought maybe the same. I thought we might see like a glove as opposed to this wrap. And, when you have those kind of things on your hands, it just becomes an instant target. So, yeah, one game down, and so far so good from what we've seen from the big fella. That was a season-high scoring performance and one in a presence that was sorely needed.
Yeah, I thought he was incredible, Brendan.
Yeah, if he didn't have the wrap around his hand, I don't think I would have known at all that he was dealing with anything. I mean, 31, 10, and 5 on 12 of 18 from the field. He almost played 40 minutes. I thought it was kind of funny that Jordi said pregame that, that there's maybe an aspect of letting him sit a game could be good for his body because he'd been playing a lot. There has been a lot of talk of the backup 5, and because they were getting that sorted out, Domas was playing so much. There was a handful of games in a row where he was playing 40 minutes. And I think allowing him to get a little bit of a rest in a way could be a good thing. But when it came to the injury, I mean, it's pretty confusing to me. I will admit I'm not great with this medical terminology, and I just do my best to be a little bit of a Google doctor to try and get a vague idea of what's going on. But it didn't look like it was bothering him at all. Like Sean said, obviously it's helpful that it's not the shooting hand, but Domas is still somebody that is finishing with that right hand. He does a lot of passing. I think when it comes to rebounding and just how physical he is overall, it didn't look like there was any sort of limitations to how he was playing yesterday. And it was one of his best games of the year against a guy that's back-to-back reigning MVP at his position.
Yeah, so the avulsion fracture, just for those who aren't caught up fully on what's happened here with Sabonis, like I saw him leave the court like everyone else did on Friday night and thought, oh, that doesn't look good because, he clearly he had hurt his left hand a couple of games earlier, right? And you could see him when he first he put his right hand on Bradley Beal's back, and just like you just watched him like kind of jar back, like, oh no, like what was that? But then he started shaking his left hand, and then he started shaking his right hand. I'm thinking, what in the world is happening here? So I hadn't really got an opportunity to watch the replay because it was Friday night before Christmas Eve. And then Christmas Eve, I, like everyone else, like I had too much going on. On Sunday, had a few minutes to sit down. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to watch and see what it is, and see if there's something you can see. And right when he put his hand on his back, and he pulled away, I thought, that's not good. I know exactly what that is. So years ago, when my son was playing soccer, he was sprinting and caught someone's elbow right between the webbing in his hand, and we had to take him to the emergency room. And I knew that it was a UCL, an ulnar collateral ligament issue. Like instantly, I knew that that's what it was. I didn't know it would be an avulsion fracture. So the avulsion fracture, Sean and I were talking. Jared Parker, a former A's pitcher, actually had avulsion fractures when they did Tommy John surgery on his elbow, and he kept breaking not the ligament, but the ligament pulls the bone off of the bone and snaps off. So a little piece of bone where it's attaching, where the ligament is attaching, it actually snaps off, and now you got a ligament floating around in for Jared Parker in his elbow, which was catastrophic for a pitcher, but for Sabonis, it's a bone floating around on the end of a ligament, just hanging loose inside your thumb area. So they're gonna wrap this thing up. They're gonna tape it and try to put it back in place and hope that the bone heals back to the bone. If it doesn't, it's surgery, or if not surgery and it gets too far away, and they're just like, okay, it is what it is, and you're just gonna have to use your hand that way now, without having the UCL ligament like attached. Anyway, it's one of those things that I think he's going to deal with quite a bit of pain over the next couple of weeks. But it's something that you can play through. It's just you might not be able to squeeze as hard with your right hand. He definitely is going to have trouble, like putting his thumb to his index finger. That's not going to be easy at all. But we watched him in warm-ups, and I don't know about you guys, but he was catching the ball with his right hand and firing with his left, and he looked totally fine right off the bat. I was surprised, like, how easily he was able to move around, and just, like, he looked fresh, he looked ready, he looked like he had some tape on his fingers, and that was about it.
Yeah, I think, the other thing was he was trying not to think about it. That's what he told us a lot after the game. Late last night, maybe early this morning.
Yeah,
we waited so long for him. But
it's like a 3-hour tour. We just sat there like, what is happening?
But even in those warm-ups, and I've made reference to how many times he touches all his teammates, with high fives and pats on the ass and the back and the shoulders and whatever. I mean, he's always just constantly touching his teammates, and he was making it point not to use that hand, even in high fives and handshakes and things like that. So it's clearly going to be a problem. And I think one thing it's worth pointing out, it's like, yeah, the average person probably gets this injury and they can heal it. The majority of professional athletes, even after play, like they'll get the off season and they'll probably cut this open and have a surgery and get it healed the right way. So don't be surprised if you see that in the off season, and it would be very obviously rather minor, and I know there's a hope that it just heals the right way, and hopefully it does, but hopefully it heals the right way, not only so that he can stay and remain on the court, but hopefully they can avoid surgery if at all possible. But the reality is the majority of professional athletes will get this worked on at some point.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of Domas's leadership as well. I don't remember if it was one of you two, but somebody was asking a lot in post game of like just how much does that mean to these other guys to see Domas go out there with this injury, play through it, and still be able to perform to the extent that he did. And like everybody said, I think we got Malik, De'Aaron, and Jordi. All of them are like, he's out there playing with a broken thumb, and look at what he did. And you don't even realize it's happening, and he's still commanding everything while he's out there. Like I think that there is all the obvious leadership things that Domas does that, like Sean just kind of pointed out, that sort of brings together his team, right? But I think just that unspoken leadership as well of playing through this and still performing at that level, I think does have an impact on the rest of his teammates.
Yeah, I think so too. Like he really is, like, that's sort of the spirit of him. We also had this other weird thing last night, which I wrote about a little bit. He was when we were walking to the locker room, he was coming down the hallway with his dad, and also I think his mom was there, and his wife and the little baby they were all walking towards us. Holy cow, Arvydas Sabonis is a gigantic human being. He dwarfs his son. Like when they're standing next to each other, and I think like I was talking to Slater from the Athletic, and he thought it was Vlade he was walking next to, and really didn't look up because he was dealing with other stuff. And man, Arvydas Sabonis is every bit the still 7'3", and
I think he's
just
bigger.
maybe
I really do, man.
I don't know. It was like
I've seen him in person before. I mean, it's been a long time. I mean, I was even making reference. I was watching the Shaq documentary on HBO Max, which was actually pretty fantastic. If no one's seen it, it's 4 episodes. And reminding myself, I was like, oh shit, like he was on those Portland teams,
yeah.
an old man on those Portland teams that the Lakers had to go up against, and seeing him play, and I'm like, I remember, like I still remember that being younger, and it's been a long time since I've seen him. And then seeing him in the hallway, and maybe it's because of the scope of seeing him next to Domas and a bunch of just normal-sized people below the 2 giants there, was like jarring. I mean, we all know how big Arvydas Sabonis' head is. Like we've made reference on it. Like it's a 10-gallon melon, and oh my god, man! I saw him. I almost stopped dead in my tracks. Like that's a huge human being.
Yeah, I mean, like shockingly big. He made, he made Domas look like a almost like a normal sized human. Like he's that big. So yeah, it kind of fun to see it. I know like his parents have been in town. I talked to Domas about this a little bit. His parents always like to come in for Christmas wherever he's at and like spend time there with the family, and they usually stay through New Year's. But it's been a hard like trek here for them, watching their son get not only hit in the face like every single game, but then we had like the Winyan Gabriel like almost took his head off thing, where Domas like snapped his neck back. Then we had the left hand injury. Then now we had the right hand injury. It's been a lot for parents to sit there and watch their kid just getting absolutely beat on. And Domas is one of 4 kids. So I mean, clearly that they have other family to go visit and stuff, but kind of a cool thing to see Arvydas here in the building and part of the team. What did you guys make of? You talked about like the old Lakers, but Vlade Divac's been in the building for both games on Tuesday and Wednesday. Kind of not great for Vlade to be in the building while you're playing without Domas, while your team is getting beat badly on Tuesday night, and then Luka Doncic is going off for 60 points, 21 rebounds, and 10 assists somewhere else in the country. It was kind of one of those moments where you're just like, okay, this is like the culmination of so many bad things that have happened to the Kings over the last decade.
Yeah, and then he was there with Brad Miller even last night. The former 2 Kings All-Stars. Like that was pretty fun to see them sit courtside. Vivek was there for that first game, and then he wasn't there last night. But someone had asked me before the game, like, isn't that kind of weird that Vlade still comes to games? And obviously referencing the fact that he had been fired as a general manager, and obviously that didn't go well. We know how that went. And I was like, I think it would be if it wasn't Vlade. Like the guy's jersey still hangs in the rafters, and he's still a legend in this town. And he just doesn't give a shit about something like that. Like it doesn't prevent him from being able to still have relationships with people within the organization. And the guy that hired him, Vivek Ranadive, it's like, yeah, you let me go. Like, but he also extended him. Like he extended him.
It's not like you walked away empty-handed.
Right. So like he took care of him. So I think if that had been like, Pete D'Alessandro or any other GM, not even Jeff Petrie, because time has gone away, been gone for so long, but maybe Scott Perry or Brandon Williams would have been a hell of a sight. But yeah, but Vlade Divac, no, I mean that's just kind of normal, and he's going to be celebrated in this town, and I think it sucks that they didn't really intro him to the crowd at either game. I think they've done that once before, and you heard a few idiots boo, but yeah, man, they should celebrate both those guys and acknowledge them.
Yeah, there was, I think he got showed on the camera for a brief second yesterday, and there's a little bit of boos, a little bit of cheers. But to Sean's point, like his name is in the rafters, and that in itself is enough for like Vlade should always feel welcome. I don't have the same interactions with Vlade as you two, obviously, and the same understanding of him as a person, but I've heard nothing but good things. And clearly his relationship with Vivek is just fine, and vice versa. Like, feel however you want about the GM tenure of Vlade, but he clearly loves Sacramento and has done a lot for the city. So in my mind, he should feel more than welcome all the time.
Yeah, Vlade is one of the best dudes you'll ever run into. He's just a fun-loving guy. He's self-deprecating. He's super funny. He's just like a gigantic teddy bear guy, and I've always like our interactions with him have always been great. I've always felt like he was as honest as he could be about like why he made the Luka pick and all that stuff. But I'll also point out, like, if Jeff Petrie walked in the door, I think Jeff Petrie should, number one, should have his name in the rafter. Number two, he should be in the Hall of Fame for his work with both the Portland Trailblazers and the Sacramento Kings. Who else has done anything with the Sacramento Kings other than Jeff Petrie? I mean, 9 of their total 10 total playoff appearances in the 37 years they've been in Sacramento are Jeff Petrie teams. And that's in a small market, and that's dealing with ownership changes and all kinds of stuff. But I'll also point out that, like, Jeff Petrie is a guy who drafted, Thomas Robinson over Damian Lillard. He's the guy who drafted Jimmer Fredette over Klay Thomas and Kawhi Leonard. And he's a guy who, made mistakes. Pete D'Alessandro took that torch and, burned it down just like everyone else did, drafting Ben McLemore over Giannis Antetokounmpo and CJ McCollum. And, there's been so many mistakes when it comes to drafting that, sure, the Luka one stands out, but does it really stand out more than if you could have had Damian Lillard and DeMarcus Cousins as two young cornerstones of your franchise? No, I don't think that stands out anymore. If you could have, again, drafted Steph Curry instead of Tyreek Evans. So, yeah, I get the Vlade, like the instant reaction, but Vlade is also the guy who didn't kill you with bad contracts that hamstrung your franchise forever. And he drafted De'Aaron Fox. He made plenty of mistakes, but so have other guys. And, he should have drafted Domas with the 9th pick in the 2016 NBA draft instead of trading that pick for Yorgos Papagiannis and Scalabiciere. But outside of that, what are you going to
do? Well, we're here now.
Here we are.
Yeah, here we are. All right. Outside of that, what do you guys make of Jordi Fernandez? We have this situation where, like having Denver in town is always weird because Michael Malone is in Denver, and Sean and I have known Michael for a long time, and that dude just loves to flame the Kings every opportunity he gets. But I mean, really, even in his first on Tuesday, his pregame media session was like, oh boy, bringing up like all kinds of stuff. But Jordi Fernandez had to step in because Mike Brown has the COVID. And Brenden, what are your first thoughts on Jordi and how he's done, especially in like a weird back-to-back, but in a pretty hostile environment too?
Yeah, I mean, I got a pretty good impression of Jordi during the time we got to interact with him at Summer League. I think that he's very willing to tell us. I enjoy when people are willing to say the shortcomings of people as well, and just maybe areas they should have improved. And I think Jordi's willing to do that while also obviously going to give praise where it's due. And it was just a cool culmination of things. The fact that it was his 40th birthday, it's against his former team, and he gets 2 games in a row of that. And it's not like the team has changed up that much. It's a lot of the same guys that he's going up against. So I thought that Jordi has done a good job. I think that he is eventually probably going to get some more recognition for head coaching jobs around the league. I think we've heard Coach Brown say that. He's been interviewed for other head coaching positions previously. I think that he seems ready. He communicates well from everything I can tell. I've never heard a bad thing about Jordi Fernandez. I'd be curious to know how his day kind of changed throughout the course of that. Like, I know game one, he still went through his pregame routine with Trey Lyles, which is typically his guy. Game two, he did not. And just curious to see kind of the back workings of how that all went about. But everybody clearly will go to war for Jordi, and I think that he's an extremely smart person. And the one other thing I'll shout out is, with Jordi getting moved over to the head coaching spot, that meant one other person was going to get moved to the front of the bench, and just noted that it was Luke Laux that got moved up there. And so shout out to Luke for getting that little nod as well. But I thought that Jordi was phenomenal in short notice circumstances and did everything you could ask for.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I'd add to that is it's great for Jordi. It's one thing for him to come in and fill in Toronto in a game where Mike Brown decides he'd rather sit in the locker room to try to motivate his dudes. And it's another thing to take over in this situation and earn what would technically but not technically be your first win, because that win and those challenges that he had as a coach, they go on the Mike Brown record. You have to just look back for when Luke Walton filled in for an ailing Steve Kerr, who was going through all his back issues for those I think it was like 40 games or whatever it was. And, you've all those wins and losses go to Steve Kerr and not Luke Walton. And the same case is here for Jordi Fernandez. So his family knows, his team knows. I think the team was they presented him with the game ball after the game, which was great. And he's an extension of Mike Brown. They are so much on the same page. It's kind of hard to articulate in a way because they do so many things the same. One's a little bit maybe a more calmer demeanor, whereas Mike can be a little bit more OCD and lively and all over the place. I think Jordy's a little bit more cerebral in that approach, and he's definitely intense. I mean, the intensity is definitely there. But I agree with just about everyone who thinks that Jordi could be a head coach in this league. I certainly feel that way. I think he'll get some looks. Hopefully they don't come, hopefully for the Kings they don't come too soon, because I think he's going to be an integral part of what this team does in the next year to 3-4 years here in Sacramento. So it was good to see that, and I think we really could use that as a jumping off point to really kind of deep dive into these two games with Denver, because I actually think that they're quite fascinating in a way as it pertains to the way the Kings have played over the last couple weeks, especially since being home for the holidays and this 6-game homestand. And it was just really strange to watch how well they played in that first Denver game, where they can build a 20-point lead, and you could say that Denver just missed shots in that first half before they rallied back and ultimately won that game. And I think Kevin Huerter was one of the first that I heard who really was like, no, or even Jordi actually, as I say, no, they missed shots. But I actually thought there was some pretty solid defense being played in that game. And then the second half is just completely different. And part of it is the big fella and Nikola Jokic just completely comes to life and looks a little bit different. And look, Michael Porter, it was sensational. It continues to shoot over everyone. And then Jamal Murray was such a factor in that second half. I mean, De'Aaron Fox was really having difficulties with Murray. And if you contrast that to the next game where you get Sabonis back, and obviously, Denver is down a few key players in that game, namely Murray and Aaron Gordon, who continued to not play, didn't play in either one. But not having Murray, it completely changed the way Denver played. That second unit is just doesn't have the depth that they would probably like.
Yeah, it's not great.
But yet here's Sacramento falling behind 19 points at one point in that game before they have to rally back and ultimately take the victory. So it's just a really interesting kind of contrast in the two games, and I think the Kings are really fortunate that they split the series. And my whole mindset coming into this 2-game series was just split. But then you break down how the sausage is made and all the nuances in a game. And this one was, I thought both these games were incredibly interesting. And again, at the end of the day, you're walking away with a split. And hopefully this 1-point victory over Denver hopefully turns things around, especially with the presence of Domas back. And we haven't even mentioned Malik Monk yet, who, I kind of feel like the Kings kind of go the way Malik Monk goes. And to see that season high performance and have three dudes score 30 points in a game, it was just pretty sensational. And I think this can be a real good leaping off point for them to kind of, put some of this bad basketball behind them.
Yeah, I'll say I think with that first game, of course you have to be able to get stops, but I actually thought that Sacramento's offense is kind of what let them down in that one. They put up 106 compared to the next night they dropped 127, and it's just a factor of not having Domas out there in my mind. We knew that it was going to be more traditional screens rather than dribble handoffs. There's just guys getting more dribbles in. It's the, I think, 5th time all year they've had 20 or fewer assists. They've lost all of those games. It's the 7th time all year they've made 10 or less triples. They've lost all of those games. And those two go together, obviously. You hit more shots, you're going to get more assists there. But some guys just weren't knocking down shots. The ball movement wasn't quite the same. And I felt like that was more so. They definitely could have been better defensively. But to me, the Kings are a team that is going to win games on the offensive end and doing enough on defense. And I thought the offense was pretty underwhelming in that Denver game. The first night of the Denver back-to-back. And then the second one, it started out kind of the same. I mean, to get outscored 40-24 in that first quarter is pretty horrible, but they picked it up as the game went on. I think that they got into a rhythm themselves offensively. De'Aaron totally turned it on in that fourth quarter. I think he had 15 points in that fourth quarter alone. Sean mentioned Malik. Obviously, with his 33 was phenomenal. Domas had 31. And to do it on a night where you see Kevin Huerter, Harrison Barnes, and Keegan Murray combined for 19 points. I think that is phenomenal. I thought one of the things that stood out to me post-game is Jordi talking about, we're always going to have our 2 all-stars of Fox and Domas, but he kind of feels like the X factor for this team is that third guy can be anybody on any given night, and last night it happened to be Malik. There's nights it can be Harrison. There's nights it can be Keegan. There's nights it can be Kevin Huerter. There's nights it could be Davion Mitchell or Trey Lyles. I think that the depth that this team has, they just need one more guy alongside those all-stars to have a big performance, or maybe a combination of 2, but they need some combination of these surrounding pieces to have good nights. And that's absolutely what we saw happen yesterday. And they got better as the game went on. 40 points for Denver in that first quarter. It goes down to 35 in the second, 30 in the third, and then 21 points in that fourth quarter. Davion Mitchell, very deserving a defense player of the game. Shane, I thought he totally changed the tides defensively, and I thought KZ Okpala was phenomenal in that game. I thought he was so amazingly disruptive when they were really struggling to get stops. He's going to have his blunders on offense, but the defense was ridiculous from both of those guys yesterday.
Yeah, you guys both brought up so many points there. First of all, I thought game 1, Jordi was slightly overwhelmed. He didn't have a ton of time to prepare. It was like everything spun out so quickly with Mike Brown. What was it, 3:00 in the afternoon? That he was ruled out with COVID. I don't know when that happened. I do know that the night before we were there for practice, and he fist bumped all of us, gave us all a happy, Merry Christmas, and then we all crowded around him while he had the COVID, and we did a scrum. But I kind of felt like Jordi was overwhelmed. He ran out of timeouts, early fourth quarter, and on top of that, I think it's something that there's something happens when you have a team that's been together forever. I'll just relate it to soccer. We get to a practice and you got a group of kids that have been together forever, and they've had 50 practices together, 100 practices together. You open up the ball bag and they all grab a ball and they literally start doing the first 25 minutes of drills that you expect them to do. And I kind of felt like this Kings team they still aren't that team. They don't just instantly do what they're supposed to do. You still have to yell and scream at this team, just like Dave Yeager did 5 years ago to run. And I think Jordy may have lost that at some point, that understanding that if you're not sticking your foot up someone's ass and telling them to run up the court, they aren't going to do it. And, you walk into a game against Jokic and you can't get out and get more than 2 fast break points. Like, that just was uncharacteristic. And I think game 2, he figured out what it was he had to do. He had to be on his team. They were very aggressive defensively, which is what he is. He's an aggressive defensive coach. But also they pushed the tempo. They didn't score 106. They didn't let the Denver Nuggets completely control the speed and pace of the game. And I also, he had timeouts. I thought there were at least 5 times where I would have challenged what I thought was a bad call, but he was too busy jawing at an official to think of challenging. And those are things that he just has to learn as he's developing as a head coach. And it's good that he's getting this run here. But then I also thought, holy cow, what a job he did in the final 6 minutes. Because for people who have not been going to games, that place was absolutely on fire.
Hold on. Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
That place was a church in the first half.
It really
it was one of the worst crowds. Hold on. That was that crowd was absolutely dreck. Now, granted, the crowd was dreck because of the product on the floor. The product was terrible.
Yeah. The team
gave
put them
in
that mode.
I remember looking over at one point. They had the drum line come out, and I said that was the coolest thing we've seen in this first half so far. It didn't take a turn until about a minute 13 remaining in the second quarter, and you have a couple great plays. The crowd kind of responds. They go into the half feeling a little bit good, and you're like, okay, here comes the third quarter. Hopefully that they can take a step forward, and they did. And the place was, to use your expression, on fire the rest of the way, and it totally gave them an edge. It really did. The crowd really played a factor last night, especially in that. Obviously it was all in the second half, because in the first half it was just, hey man, who wants another hot toddy or something? Because it was. Yeah.
That was a team, though. I mean, the crowd went so crazy when DeAndre Jordan missed his first free throw, and then they were hoping to get crumble cookies. And it's like, you miss 2 in a row, you get crumble cookies. But it showed you, they were just waiting, and the team was just not responding. They just weren't. They didn't look like themselves. It's 2 games in a row where De'Aaron Fox has come out flat. I mean, the first game, he had the monster dunk in the first play of the game, and then didn't shoot again in the first quarter. Last night, he scored 15 in the fourth. He scored 14 in the second. He finished with 31. So those other 2 points, they came in the third quarter when the team was teetering, and in the first quarter, he had nothing. And it's like, where are you at early in games? He needs to be a tempo setter, but also he needs to understand that if you want that crowd engaged, then you got to go get them. You got to go bring them into the conversation and not just let them sit there on their hands wondering what in the hell is happening with the team for first 15 minutes of the game. And so to me, the way it finished though, to get back to Jordy, I don't know how he was able to manage, because he was doing defensive subs. He used KZ so effectively. He used Davion so effectively. He kept going back to Monk when Kevin Huerter couldn't get things going. He relied heavily on Sabonis and Fox, but also he keeps finding something with Trey Lyles, who came up so huge for a second straight game. Just tremendous. He ended up with 9 rebounds again, I think. He's flying in and doing exactly what you have to do when the best rebounder in the game is hurt and can't go get all the rebounds that he usually gets. So I thought for Jordy to be present in that final 6 to 8 minutes, while that arena was so intense. I mean, it was like goosebump intense. And for him to stay in the moment, I thought that was a huge sign of growth for him as a coach, because that was not an easy environment. And if he would have lost that game, man, a lot of people would have gone home really angry, but It's the biggest crowd ever in Golden One Center history. Again, for like the third time this week, the biggest crowd ever. And I thought it was a great crowd by the end of the game. Just holy cow.
15 short of 18,000 people in the building is the number that they ended up giving us. And to your point with Jordy's rotations, like this was the least minutes that Kevin Huerter's played all year. He played like 17 and a half minutes. And there were just other guys that were more effective. And typically Huerter is in that closing rotation, but I don't know that we've ever seen a closing rotation that doesn't have Huerter and doesn't have one of HB or Keegan. And last night, closing lineup is Fox, Davion Mitchell, Malik Monk, Trey Lyles, and Domantas Sabonis. And they were getting it done. And I think that that's just, again, echoing your statement of just so much credit to Jordy for figuring out the right combination of what was working on that night.
Well, and Davion was, he said it. Jordy said it afterwards. He called him a superhero defensively. The guy he was really good. With respect to KZ, he again, you mentioned it, some of the blunders offensively. He was a difference maker, but like Davion was incredible, absolutely incredible. Those guys, what he did, he was on Bones Highland's hip the entire time he touched the ball. And even in a lot of the switches that they did, like Davion's just right there. I thought he injured Nikola Jokic going over top of the screen that Jokic went to pick, just by getting around him, and I thought he like bumped into his knee or something and hurt Jokic at one point. That's how aggressive and what a bulldog he was, and just absolutely a difference maker. Like those guys didn't want a ball near Davion Mitchell at any point.
Yeah, and we keep mentioning KZ sort of like in passing. Michael Porter Jr., who was incredible in Game 1, and the second half had in 18 minutes went 1 of 5 from the field and had 3 points, ran a -10. Like that was so impactful. What I thought that what he was able to do is he was able to maximize his talent. He was able to have guys go out there and do things that they can do and figure out ways to do. Like again, Trey Lyles did all the dirty work. That play late in the game, which the 2-minute report is harsh on the Kings with 58 seconds left. I think Jokic grabs a rebound. Sabonis fouls him, which should have been his sixth and final foul. The ball goes like towards the out of bounds, and Jokic like walked over like he was just going to grab it and pick it up. Trey Lyles had fallen down out of bounds, dives back in bounds, which he was not in bounds. He was actually out of bounds. The 2-minute report has 2 errors on the same play, but he swatted the ball to Sabonis for a dunk. Probably the biggest play of the game. And it was just Trey Lyles like fighting. Just like stay in it, man. Just do what you can do. And that's how this team, like realistically, that's how you got to win. You can get some grit out of Fox and Barnes and Keegan Murray, a little bit of grit out of those guys with Huerter. But the real guys that you're going to get grit out of is Sabonis and then the other guys that are coming up big. And so, yeah, I thought it was a really good moment for all of them. Good coaching, good, role players coming up, big star level players hitting huge shots.
That Trey Lyles play to Sabonis for that dunk was the equivalent to that Jamal Murray 3 in Game 1, because the Kings had essentially made the stop, and it forced them to take just some crazy shot from Murray, and he hit it, and it totally turned the tide of that game. That 96-96 I think was the tie game, and the run that they went on at that point was totally the difference maker in that first game. So yeah, I'm glad we got to deep dive these 2 games, because I just feel like it's such a fascinating series, and especially for where the Kings are right now and some of the adversity that they went through, and then coincide with, again, like it or not, you're at home, and you're going to have a stretch right now this week of 3 games in 4 nights with Utah coming in here, and then you hit the road real quickly. But it's going to be, I think this is going to be a moment for this team to kind of look back, reassess, reset a little bit, and hopefully keep their head above water. And because you got some pretty good opposition on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just echo again real quick the Davion play from last night, because I think there's so much credit due there. To Sean's point, he was phenomenal on Bones Highland. And Jokic obviously is going to do what he does, 40, 10, and 46 and 7. I'm sorry, 46 and 6. Got that one eventually. Michael Porter Jr. had his portion of the first half where he was just totally taking over even when Jokic wasn't out there. And then it was Bones Highland in that third and kind of beginning of the fourth that was like every time the Kings were chipping away at that lead and it seemed like, okay, maybe they're going to cut it to 8 points or less, somebody would hit a big shot. And it was Bones towards the later portion of that game. And then when Davion is out there picking up full court, and just pestering the heck out of him. I thought that Davion was so good, and he's just far and away the best perimeter defender, containment, just guy that's going to muck up the game that this team has. Like KZ, I guess, is the closest thing, but he has his shortcomings on the other end. Like Davion was so phenomenal in this game. I don't think they win this game without Davion. And then that last 2-minute report, I think it's just important to acknowledge, like we were really frustrated earlier in the year at the Golden State game, at the Miami game. Like from Denver's point of view, I'd be pretty mad about those last 2-minute report blunders because that was the biggest play of the game. So just point being, it comes back around.
Yeah, I think it's crazy that the game last night, how many lead changes do you guys think there were?
Not many because they took their first lead. I think it was in the fourth quarter. So, yeah, just one, right? Yeah.
One lead change.
The Kings never led by more than 2 points.
Absolutely incredible. And the 2 points came on the Trey Lyles play where he dove back in bounds and got the ball to Sabonis. And not only did they, scorekeepers, you got to love them, they gave Trey Lyles a rebound and an assist on that play for him diving back in, tapping into Sabonis.
You know, it's funny. I mean, it's funny, though, like, you know, I know I mentioned it a minute ago, but it's just the unusual factor in these two games. It's like if you fell down 20 like Denver did or 19 as the Kings did, you were able to rally and come back and come back and put those large deficits and turn them into a victory. Yeah, man, not great, but also kind of cool as well, because I honestly felt like last night, like them falling in the hole was like a mini wake up call, if you will, because I think it helped that Sabonis was on the court, because had they done that, I think in the first game, let's say it was the Kings that had fallen down 19 or 20, I think they would have folded. I really do, because I think, you know, we touched on it briefly, but Fox was not good in that game. And, you know, we were talking about, like, if Sabonis was gone for any long-term, you know, few games, maybe 2 weeks here, whatever it is, as he tries to get over this injury, and hopefully that doesn't. I mean, that could still happen. Let's be honest.
4 to 6 weeks. If he goes out for surgery, it's 4 to 6 weeks recovery.
Right. And you know, the pressure that's back on Fox to be like, okay, step up. You want to be in that all-star conversation. Here you go. Like, I know Sabonis makes up for so much of what they do and takes pressure off of Fox, but now with him gone, it's like, okay, well, you're back with your starting center again in Rashawn Holmes, and granted, you didn't win a lot of games together, but you at least know what this looks like. Go get it, you know, and you hope to keep your head above water at that point. So even though he scored, I think it was 26 points, it just goes to show you that points aren't everything, because he was not good in that game. They turned the ball over. Jamal Murray ate his lunch, and it just didn't go well. It didn't go well at all.
Yeah, he had the 5 turnovers, but 2 of them, they didn't even give him one of them. They said one of them was a missed shot, but one of them was just a bad turnover. And then the other, I mean, there came bang plays, and both of them led to a 3-pointer, and it cost you the game. I thought it played into that whole conversation of Vlade Divac's in the building, Michael Malone on the other side. You have all of these things playing out on the same night where Luka has this monster night, and then you have De'Aaron Fox, who has an opportunity to be a superstar in a game without Sabonis, and he looked like he didn't really, like, I don't want to say he didn't come to play. He looked like he just kind of coasted for moments of the game, and you're like, man, like, this is a moment where, like, you honestly look around and go, okay, if you needed De'Aaron Fox to go for 40, could you get it? If you need him to go for 50, could you get it? And I think the answer is, like, I don't know. I don't think you can count on it. Like, if Sabonis is there, yeah, he can go get you 31. But, this is a guy who needs to, like, in that moment, realize that you got to take 25 shots. You got to be the guy. You got to take over the game. And every time he did do it, it was like, holy cow, look how good you are. Just keep doing it. And it's hard to, like, really harp on him, because then he has a 31 and 13 night, which is kind of what I was asking for the night before. Like, if Sabonis isn't there, you have to be more than what you have been, but you also need to be a scorer, and you need to set up your teammates. You need to make everyone else better in that moment. And then you get to the next night, and he's so huge in the fourth quarter. And I don't know if you guys saw the stat, but, like, right now, clutch shooting, which is, like, I don't know if it's 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter or whatever, he's leading the league at 57% at clutch shooting, and no one else is within 10% of him in clutch shooting in the fourth quarter. So, like, Fox is having a major impact and being very, very good for moments. He's averaging almost 24 points a game. He's doing all these things, but at the same time, you're always left with this: when you need it, can you do it? And I don't know. I don't know if that's fair or not.
It's one of those frustrating things that you've seen through him, because it's certainly he's there in the fourth quarter. He recognizes the moment, but it's like, hey, first, second, third, where's that same kind of intensity? Go ahead, Brenden. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. I mean, I think I definitely feel the first game that, like, I wanted more from De'Aaron, but I also feel like if guys are hitting shots, that they're in that game. And De'Aaron and Herter combined for 6. Yeah, and it's like, I think he was fine in that first half. Like, could have done more in the fourth, I think, defensively. Like, he definitely could have done more on Jamal Murray, but, like, Harrison Barnes and Keegan Murray were totally MIA in the second half of that game. Like, if those guys hit some shots, if Malik Monk makes 1 or 2 of his triples instead of ending the game with 8 points and 0 made threes, like, I don't know. Definitely wanted more from De'Aaron, and especially when you see no Domas, there's going to be more pick and roll. And that was something that Mike had talked about at practice the day before. Jordi had talked about, like, we don't have Domas, but we still have another all-star out there. And I think that you definitely wanted more from De'Aaron, but I think there isn't. I can't help but look at the 10 of 35 from 3 and see De'Aaron making 3 of those 10 and think, well, maybe if some other guys hit some shots, that game goes a little differently.
Well, and beyond that, too, they needed Malik Monk to be a playmaker in that game. 1 assist, the fast break points weren't there. Malik was trash. He held himself accountable after the game. And for the most part, in December, Malik Monk has not been good. So it was good to see him kind of take to Twitter to acknowledge it and then come out with the effort that he had, because it wasn't like the turnovers are going to be there with him. I mean, he takes a lot of risks out there, but he hasn't had that swagger in the better part of this month, and it goes back to the road trip. To see him kind of take some ownership there and realizing that, hey, we know he's not the best player on the team. I've called him the most important player on the team because of how infectious he is and the way his teammates respond to him. And look, you know what you're going to get from Fox and Sabonis. Malik Monk is that important, and I feel like there's a huge correlation into the way this team will tend to ebb and flow throughout the season. And they need him to be playing at a high level and have that swagger. And he got it back for a night. And I know he wanted to bring it to LA a couple nights before. And fortunately, it ended up in a win. But he wasn't good in that game. He only played 18 minutes. So yeah, I think a lot of the ebb and flow with this team, especially when they're not good, kind of translates into Malik Monk not having a good game or bringing that energy, because in a game where you don't have Sabonis and you're now at a void for playmaking, you really needed Malik Monk to be that playmaker with Fox, and it just wasn't there.
Yeah, I got the pug walking by.
I've got my dishwasher too, so if you wonder what the noise in the background is, my dishwasher's working overtime.
Yeah, the pug just walked by, his little click clack on the hardwood. Let's do Thursday overreactions, which is always Sean's favorite. We always talk about this, like when you're a player and you get a couple of games off to, whether injury or whatever the reason might be, and you sit back and you watch the game, sometimes it gives you a different perspective, and it opens your mind to, like, ways that you can help and adjustments that you can make. Do you think that Mike Brown is going to take some of what he saw from Jordi's coaching over the last 48 hours and go, okay, maybe I can try this. Maybe I can do this. Or maybe that is a good idea. Maybe, I don't know, when we got a tall wing player going nuts, that maybe I should probably send KZ Okpala in to try to slow him down, or, like more time for Davion in certain situations. Or again, Malik Monk averaging 22 minutes a game on the season. Maybe he does need to play closer to 28. So, do you think there's anything that stood out to you that Mike Brown may have got a unique perspective of watching his team from home?
I think it's hard to gauge how much is Jordy's decisions versus Mike's. Obviously Mike is still like involved throughout this entire process and talking to Jordy, and talks to him after the first game about differences with X's and O's and all that going into the next game. So, but I think that the standout thing for me in this that I'd like to see carry over, the pug is adorable, is the small ball lineups, like Trey Lyles playing at the 5. You're searching at that backup 5, and it's been a try everything. And I think one of the things they've tried and we've seen be fairly effective is Trey Lyles at that backup 5. And that's against Jokic. Like, if you're able to get away with it there, then you're probably able to do that in some other matchups as well. And I think it's one of those things that don't try so hard to cover up one of your weaknesses that you lose a strength in the process. And that's what I worry about a bit with this backup 5 situation and search for rim protection. And I think having Trey Lyles out there, if you can just survive on defense, he obviously is a guy I think that can somewhat fill what you want offensively, a decent decision maker, spaces the floor. You can play 5 out when he's out there at the 5. So that's the one I think X's and O's thing I'd like to see carry over a bit more, is some of that small ball 5 lineups.
Well, it gave him some tape to go over for sure, and I know Mike Brown's going to be scouring over that. I don't know that too much will change. I think the one thing I'm curious is to see if they go small, more so than we've seen them go small several times. I think we saw some small lineups a lot in this series, and I kind of wonder if they might look at that a little bit more. But I also feel like we're in a stretch now, even with Sabonis back, that I kind of think Rashawn Holmes has earned some minutes. I think there's some extended minutes that could be coming his way, and I think he's kind of earned that. It's up to him whether or not he can kind of embrace those small extended minutes that he'll get and make the most of them. Certainly, the rebounding presence would certainly help, especially when Sabonis isn't out there. But the one thing that still kind of confounds me is when he's out there, it's like you don't see him run very much, and when Fox and Rashawn would play together, you'd see them run quite a bit. He'd be a lob threat, but we've seen the push shot back. I think I don't think Jordy was totally scared to use him and go to him out of necessity, obviously in Game 1, but even a little bit in Game 2. So would like to see a little bit more of that.
Yeah, and I mean, I do have the pug. You'll hear the pug hum here in a minute. He
hums?
He purrs.
How do you
like
make it
cat.
hum?
You hear him?
No.
He purrs like a cat. You'll hear him eventually when I start talking. What did you guys make of the Alex Lynn decision? Like, you gotta break glass in case of emergency.
That was dumb. It just was dumb.
You think so?
Yeah, I didn't think it was very impactful. I guess, look, hey, you want to reward a guy for being ready, and obviously you got a guy in Jokic that's here, but to me it was going to be it was Rashawn Holmes, and Rashawn Holmes has played well against Jokic in the past, especially if you can get him to run. That to me would have been the move I did. I just didn't feel that Alex Len was impactful at all.
I was definitely surprised by it. I talked myself into it, kind of talking.
And sorry, Brenden, and that was a Mike Brown decision. I just want to make sure and keep people listening.
Yeah,
it wasn't a Jordy.
Yeah.
It wasn't Jordy deciding to go with. That was a Mike Brown decision that he wanted to go with. I just didn't think that was going to be all that smart. But I understand what they were doing. It's a stay ready thing. Sorry, Brenden.
No, you're good. I think that I talked myself into it being matchup related. That it's Jokic. It's something Jordy mentioned in pregame prior to their first matchup. Like, there is an aspect of you just want a big body to match up with Jokic. But I would have gone with Rashawn as well, and I thought that was definitely the way to go. Alex Len played 25 minutes the entire year coming into that game. So it was definitely a weird decision. I talked myself into it, and I don't think it's like the reason that they lost that game against Denver or anything. Like Jokic didn't take many shots in the first half, but he also wasn't destroying them when it came to his scoring necessarily. So I thought it was weird, but it wasn't all too harmful.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Alex Len did fine. I mean, in the first half, I mean, he held him to 2 points in the first half, and we can say, well, he didn't take that many shots, but you can also say, well, Alex Len fought to keep him off of his spots. And, Jokic is a guy who you got to pick up all over the place. I mean, some of the stuff he does is just bizarre and it's crazy. And the fact that it goes in, it's just stunning. Like some of those things that he does, even like the final shot that he took last night, like I thought, oh boy, like when it left his hand, it had a shot. It's definitely he's really difficult. He's probably top like 5 most difficult players to defend in the league, and it's just because he can do all kinds of things with the ball. So, I thought it was pretty intriguing. I don't know that I would have made that decision either, but I also realize you got a veteran that you can put out there and say, go ahead and give me whatever you can give me, and then we'll work around it from there. And I thought the fact that the Kings got off to a 20-point lead in that game was a lot because Jokic just wasn't part of it. And the fact that you gave it all up, it had nothing to do with Jokic initially. It had everything to do with the fact that no one else could stop Michael Porter Jr. and you didn't, try something different there. So, yeah, I thought it was interesting. But, when you're desperate times call for desperate measures. So I think Mike will look at the tape and like he'll come across a couple of things that may be something that he plays into what he's doing going forward, especially, give KZ some opportunities here and there when you know that you've got a player that you just can't stop with anyone else. And we've seen that a bunch. We've seen it a bunch lately where you're just like, man, if you only had somebody you could put out there and slow that guy down just a little bit, make life difficult on somebody. I think you're going to need him throughout the season to step up in those moments. Okay, do we have a business of basketball question? The pug is tugging on me. Business of basketball. Yeah, he's and now the corgi's coming to join in.
You've got a whole you have a whole farm going on over there.
I do, but the wife and the boys aren't here, so the dogs are like coming around and trying to say hi. I'm going to throw this one to you. You guys both have been really strong over the last like 2 weeks of saying this is a good basketball team, that they had convinced you that the 3-3 on the road made them a good basketball team. The losses, the subpar losses, bad losses over the last 2 weeks, are you still there? Knowing that they very well could have been right back to 500 if they wouldn't have won that game last night in a really tough, like hard-fought game all the way down the stretch.
I think for me, like anytime somebody asks me pregame how I feel on a certain night, if it's going to be a win that night, like it could be anybody that they're up against. It could be the best team in the West. It could be the worst team in the league, like we just saw with Denver and Charlotte. And I never know. And I think that is at times a good thing and at times a bad thing. And that comes down to still being super inconsistent on defense. Like I think this team is good because they are a ridiculous offensive team. They just have to do enough on defense. And I will say, I think those Charlotte and Washington games were pretty concerning to me. That was the first time where they just looked horrific there. Maybe not the first time, but against those subpar teams where it's like Bradley Beal's going to get his, LaMelo Ball's going to get his. It's Kelly Oubre dropping 30. It's Kyle Kuzma dropping 30 and Rui Hachimura dropping a season high 21. Like
KZ Okpala.
Right. Like maybe try it.
I'm just saying.
Let's settle.
You at least
down.
have to. You have to
everything, but
no,
but you have
down.
to try on occasion something different.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
I think good. I don't think we're talking about like a home court advantage team, obviously, and I don't think that was ever the conversation. Like I think we're still talking about a play-in team, and I worry about the consistency of a team that to me has shown that they still are going to have nights where they look genuinely horrific on defense. So until that gets cleaned up, and maybe I'm just a defense guy and quick to get agitated when I see those type of nights, and maybe they'll prove to be outliers. I was willing to write off the Charlotte one as an outlier, but then when that happens again in that Washington game, it's pretty concerning to me. But I don't have any concerns that we're like talking outside of the play-in or anything like that. Like, I still think this is a good team, but you're going to be inconsistent if you can't figure out how to be a solid defensive team most nights.
500 basketball teams are very inconsistent. That's just kind of how it is. And why are you laughing, James Ham?
We're back to the 500 basketball team.
No, I'm not saying
Sean was willing to say good team. Now he's back to the 500 basketball team.
No, I still am willing to say good team because of the quality depth that they've added. And, they still need some help, and I think they need to upgrade some areas that they have. We've talked about that ad nauseum. The thing that I would hang their hat on, especially if they have improved defensively, which I think they have, and I think that's going to continue, but I think it's going to, be missing at times. I think playing around the holidays when you're at home is a tough thing to do. It shouldn't be, but it is. People just get lazy. They have family in town, a lot of distractions, a lot of things pulling at them, and then you dealt with some adversity around that as well. No excuse. I think the 3-3 road trip bought them some equity, which I think is great. And now they've got that equity kind of,
they spent it.
They spent it, and they, and to be on that, like, you kind of think, I think sometimes you get the mindset that you're better than you think they are. I think Mike Brown called it a reality check a couple weeks ago, or a week ago, when they lost to, help me out, James, that was Charlotte
or Washington. One of them, he called it a reality check.
Yeah. So, look, I just think that that's the right mentality. And again, like, you're going to have moments, a season isn't made in a 2-week span, but I think the thing that this team can hang its hat on is it really competes. Like, this is a competitive team that tries really hard. And as Brendan made reference to, and we've talked about it various times throughout this season, they're, like it or not, their identity is on the offensive end. Like, they are a offensive juggernaut type team, and they need to embrace what they are, in my opinion. At that, that's just what you are. And if you can show any level of compete on the defensive end and show some improvement there, that'll go a long way. But their bread is buttered on the offensive end, and you need to be that fun, flying around, lighted up team. And I'll say this, like, usually, we can watch games, and I'm usually the one talking the most shit during a game. I think James Ham might have me beat this year because
we talk shit.
Oh no, we do. But
we're like the two old guys on the Muppets that sit.
We are.
Yeah.
But I think I don't know. I think this team can bring it out of you. This season's team can bring it out of you even more so than me, as I've been known to be cranky at times of what I've seen. You've been pretty. If that first half was any indication, like, that was enjoyable. I was even entertained by some of the things James Ham was saying in that first half last night.
Yeah, like, I how many times I just don't want same old Kings, Show me that you're better. Show me that you're better.
Yeah, and I've been the guy that, like I'll say, like, there's still this fragility. I think, I like to think that this team is better at handling physicality, and at times I think that's true, and then there's other times where I go, no, that isn't true. This is still a very fragile team for the most part at times, but. That second half, man, I mean, that game last night I thought was pretty physical, and in that second half they punched back, so that was kind of what you want to see, some resolve there, and I think that they showed it for the most part, and I think you just break down each game into the 4 quarters that they are and treat them as 4 individual games, and if you're looking at the game that way from quarter to quarter to quarter, I think you kind of like what you see for the most part.
Okay. I think I'm going to finish with this question. I'm going to hit you guys with this. Did the Sabonis injury, because I think he's going to play most nights going forward. There could be times where this thing swells up and he just can't move his hand. There also is a possibility that he gets through this that he learns how to play with it. But does his injury and the way this thing has played out over the last, 72 hours, Does it change your thinking if you're Monty McNair or Wes Wilcox about how quickly you probably need to add another body? You need to go out and find somebody that you're more comfortable with playing 20 plus minutes a night if you need to at the center position versus what you have right now where you seem to be a little unsure. Would you be active right now on the trade market?
I mean, I think so, but I think I was kind of already at that point. I don't think that I'm like pushing that it needs to happen as soon as possible, but I think you have those conversations. And I think that the caveat with this whole thing is just like, don't spend much. Like, if you can bring in some guy that maybe you think just fits better. I mean, I keep going back to Nerlens Noel, for example, and feel whatever about him, but I think he's that type of example of a guy that's not going to cost much. Um, and maybe you can bring him in, and maybe that makes a little bit of a difference. But I think that sure, there's value in bringing in another guy. I think that they should have already been looking at that, and I'd imagine are. And will continue to. I don't think you need to make this happen as soon as possible because, to be honest, if you don't have Domas out there, like you're pretty screwed. Like there's still ways you're getting wins, but this team is not the same. Screwed is maybe a little over the top, but like Domas is the identity of this team. They play the way they do because they have one of the best passing bigs in the entire NBA, and their style is just not going to be there without Domas. And I don't think there's anybody you can look at around the league and try to replicate that. So I think that they probably already should have been talking about having conversations about various backup centers, but don't be spending much. They have 2 second rounders they're working with. Like if we're talking Terrence Davis, like some sort of fringe rotation pieces, then sure. But I don't know that I'm offering much to try to get a backup center because if Domas isn't out there, then the team is just not going to be the same, to be honest.
Yeah, I can't really add much to that. I think you're going to be aggressive anyway. There's things you could look throughout the waiver wire, perhaps, and but then again, it's like at the expense of what, right? Like your rotation is pretty full at this point. You might have a few holes, but is anyone going to come off the street, or is anyone going to be taking a? You mentioned some guys on the. Typically, if you're making a trade for some sort of backup center, like they're probably not being used very well in the meantime right now anyway. So essentially they're walking in hopefully in game shape because of practice times and stuff like that. And you're hoping them to come in and be able to, have any better impact than people who are already on your team. I don't know. I don't think it makes me more aggressive because you should be aggressive anyway. This team isn't good enough to where you can't just, shut her down and just say, okay, we're gonna go with this and rest on our laurels and maybe get closer to February before we start kicking the tires. Like you already have to be in search of trying to land that big three or that rim protector or whatever else you feel that this team could use, or trying to upgrade a certain position or two on your team already. So yeah, I think they should be aggressive. I think they will be, and. But I agree with everything Brenden said. You lose Domas, and you can start.
Tell it goodbye.
3-2-1 Cancun.
Yeah, I'm going to say this. I still think that there are players that can help you in this situation, and I'm going to keep monitoring the Charlotte Hornets because I really do believe that if there is a guy that you could bring in to play 20 plus minutes, it could go up to 30 plus minutes if you needed to. It's probably Mason Plumlee that can help you. And now you can hear the pug purring down below.
I thought that was your stomach.
No, that's the pug. He likes to make funny noises all day long. But yeah, I mean, I'm watching Charlotte right now. They're 9-26. If they don't turn things around very quickly, he's a $9 million contract that you could probably get with some of the pieces you guys are talking about. The Kings still have some trade exceptions. They still have some ability to throw in a second-round pick. And he's an expiring contract. He's 32 years old. But I think he instantly comes in. He knows J.H. Triano's offense really well. He can pass the ball. He can block a few shots. He can get you rebounds. He can be a tough guy. If I'm the Kings, I'm circling him. And if you can get a P.J. Washington or you can get something else to sweeten that and make it a better trade opportunity for you, then that's one thing. But I just think that you do need that extra piece to kind of get you closer to your goal, and that is just to have 9 guys that you can count on every single night. If you added him, I think you're up to 8, and then you can mix and match with that last position. But that's just my opinion. Okay, so let's finish this off. What do you guys got for final thoughts? Brendan, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, I thought Golden One Center was great last night. Like Sean mentioned, there were moments in that first half that you really noticed it was silent in there, and it was pretty crazy. But understandably so. I don't blame the fan base for that at all. That's on how the team was performing. But then that second half, it got really loud in there. Like I mentioned, the number they gave us is 15, just 15 people under 18K in that building, and it was freaking loud, man. Jordi Fernandez talked about sometimes felt like they were playing 6-on-5. De'Aaron Fox called it. He said it should be one of the best home court advantages in all of sports. Like Golden One Center was amazing last night, and it was fun to be in the building. If anybody gets a chance to go to games, it is a blast. I did talk it up to some friends and family, and then they went to the Washington game. So that was not the best, but I swear most games is a fun experience and environment.
Yeah, completely agree. I don't really have many final thoughts. I think that this, it's another moment to just tell some Kings fans to just kind of chill, enjoy the ride a little bit. Don't get so wound up. You're going to be your own worst enemy at times. So this team will, have their ups and downs. And I think right now, this, like I said, started off by saying I think this win over Denver. I know it was a 1-point win, just the way it happened. I think this could springboard them a little bit. I think this kind of get them better to looking more like their self, especially if Domas is able to kind of stay on the court. So really curious to see how they come out against Utah here on Friday. That Memphis game might be catching them at the right time. They've kind of sputtered on the road a little bit, so we'll see what they look like when they're back at home. So and not sure if we have another podcast before the turn of the calendar here, but if
we're
not,
gonna have to discuss. Yeah, we're gonna have to discuss that one. Yeah, I mean it's been wild. Like again, this week, just so people know, the reason we're doing the first pod on Thursday, Monday night we had practice at I think we were supposed to be there at 4:30, and then it moved up to 4, and then it moved back, and then we found out that there was a medical thing with Domas, so work went crazy. Then we had games on Tuesday and Wednesday, so here we are on Thursday. Fitting these things in is difficult some weeks. Maybe we can do something. I don't know. Maybe we can do something Saturday morning. We'll see. But yeah, let's see. Final thoughts for me. If we don't see everyone, Happy New Year. This is one of the first times I can remember where the Kings don't have a game on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, right? Or do they have? No, they have one on New Year's Day, but it's on the road and it's in the evening. The last couple of years, they keep hitting us with early New Year's Eve games or 2:00 New Year's Day games. So let's see what else. They just took the Kings ESPN game away. And move that game. The Houston Rockets, they were playing the Houston Rockets next month. That is no longer an ESPN game.
Not the fault of the Kings, though, right?
No, that's on the Rockets.
I kind of feel
that's
like
schedule makers.
Yeah, I kind of feel like they're going to get one back. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be I don't think that was because of the Kings, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that there will be opportunities for them to get a couple of games. But if you look at the next 5 games, it's going to be tough, right? So they've got Utah, Memphis, Utah, Hawks, and then after
Lakers
that,
and Magic.
Then it starts to let up. So if this team can, again, hang around, rope-a-dope a little bit around the 500 mark over their next 5 games, if they or even their next 4, if they can split these 4, and then they can get into this run where it's Lakers, Magic, Rockets, Spurs, Lakers, Thunder, and then you got the 76ers, which is tough, and Grizzlies tough, Raptors. If they can get through this right here and build some good momentum, I'm saying there's a chance. This is one of those moments where just again split these next four, and then you got an opportunity to put the pedal to the metal and really pick up some ground and become one of those teams that people are talking about, but also a team that potentially could get to a point where you might be talking about the possibility of two All-Stars, especially with Devin Booker going out, Anthony Davis going out. We're starting to see some things happening around the league that could open the door for De'Aaron Fox. So this is a moment where, like, seize it if you're De'Aaron Fox, if you're Domantas Sabonis, go get that All-Star bid. Don't hope to back into it because you got some injuries. Go take it right now because it's sitting there waiting for you. And I think they have an opportunity here to make some major noise. Okay, I think that's going to do it. We got final thoughts done. If you're still watching on YouTube, you don't mind, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the Kings Beat. Make sure you're following all the wonderful work that Sean Cunningham is doing on Fox 40. Make sure that you're following Brenden Nunes and all the work he's doing at the Kings Herald and the Kings Pulse podcast. And you've even picked up, helping out your guy Frankie and Chris, showing up on 1140 here and there. So make sure you're following all the good work that Brendan's doing.
Can you wear that shirt again on Friday? The one you wore last night?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
I want to get a poll. Like, do people like this shirt or not?
They do, Sean. You're the only one that had a comment. Yeah, Sean walked up and gave me a whole. Was it Kevin Garnett to Craig
I did
Sager?
Yeah, exactly. I said, burn this.
Yeah, when you get home, burn this shirt. I would tell Sean the same thing, but I'd worried he'd run out of shirts pretty quick. So.
I'd run out of shirts. Yeah, it's all the same.
That's spectacular.
Standard Cunningham uniform. They all look this. They're like hoodies and black polos. And
do they still sell Hurley hats? Like,
yeah, man. What's wrong with you? How dare you?
Just wondering.
Do you wear a Hurley hat every day?
It's owned by Nike, by the way. Yeah, pretty much. I have a lot, so kind of rotate them out.
I know my guy over at Brick House built me a new rounded bill hat, which is beautiful.
Built you?
He did. He whittled it out of clay. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. All right. We don't even have any movie banter or anything today. We didn't make fun of Brendan.
What did I see?
What did you see?
I watched most of Glass Onion, but I fell asleep.
Jesus Christ!
I saw that at the theaters. My boys are big. They like the murder mystery stuff. So,
at what point did you fall asleep? Like 30 minutes in?
No, probably like an hour and a half. I was really engaged too because I like those type of movies, and like I'm thinking that like some tiny detail at the beginning is going to matter later, right? So I was very engaged, and then I fell asleep.
I like that.
You've seen that one, right, Sean?
Yeah, I saw that. I gave Jason Ross, our friend over at 1140, I gave him a recommend. He asked me if I'd seen it, and I think I disappointed him because I said, yeah, I liked it. And he's like, wait, I sense hesitation there. And I said, well, I liked the first one better probably.
Yeah.
But that's nothing. That's not taking away from this one.
If I was giving it like a Rotten Tomatoes score or Metacritic score, I'd go like 60.
He and G-Man both took my Vengeance recommendation, and they really enjoyed that movie.
Yeah, I enjoyed that as well. That's BJ Novak, right?
Yeah, I saw the menu for. I don't know if I mentioned that in the last podcast.
I think maybe you did.
Kind of enjoyed it.
I need to go back and watch that. I have not watched it. It was
all right. I don't know if it's worthy of like so much critical acclaim it's getting, but it's okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Well, I think that's going to do it for this edition of the Kings Beat podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being subscribers to the Kings Beat and all the support that we've gotten over this year. It's been a really fun year. Big thank you to Brenden Nunes for stepping in when Sean had to step away for a couple of months and joining us here and becoming this trio that we keep bringing to you every week, sometimes most of the time twice a week. And, stick around. It's been a fun season of Kings basketball. They got a chance, and you can only hope for better things here as the calendar year rolls over into 2023. So for Fox 40's Sean Cunningham and Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast, I am James Hamby, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. We'll see you soon.